You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
This is Grand Design Podcast with DJ and Jerry Grand, where we link the chains of reason of sports, politics, and culture.
Welcome back to the Grand Designs Podcast. I'm DJ Grand, and I'm joined again with my brother Jerry.
Hello.
And temporarily with Ryan still.
Wow, they keep pulling me out of this. What the heck? Not cool. Sorry.
To let you know how to get a hold of us, granddesigns.podcast.com is our website. Email us at granddesigns.podcast@yahoo. You can subscribe to us on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Instagram at Grand Designs Podcast, and follow us on Twitter at Grand Designs Pod. Before we start in the major topic of what we're going to be talking about today, back in episode 4, we talked about how officiating in professional sports, and it really played out in a bad way in the NHL.
Now, I want to make a point that we also discussed that the referees in the NHL do not want to be the outcome or the result of a game. And I was told this by a ref who is still currently a referee in the NHL, that they do not want to basically decide the game. So in overtime, the whistles go away and it's pretty much let the boys play. That didn't happen.
Well, with the Golden Knights and the San Jose Sharks, I saw it and I did not. If you wanted to call it a penalty, maybe, but a 5-minute major that actually turned the game around for the San Jose Sharks and gave them the series. Talk about deciding it for a team. That's exactly what they did.
Well, yeah, the Golden Knights are up 3-0 with 10 minutes to go in the game. I turned it on. The penalty was already called. The power play had already started. And I couldn't believe when I watched them literally score 4 goals and the whole momentum of the game was over. When they scored the second goal, you could just tell that the Knights, because it was a bad call. I didn't know at the time, but you could just tell that their energy had just gone down. So it definitely turned the game. So, and the NHL, if I'm not mistaken, came out and apologized the next day, admitting that they made a mistake, which is.
And also basically punished that crew and not allow them to ref in another Stanley Cup final.
And they shouldn't, but that doesn't help the Knights, because they had that game and that series. That was game 7. That is not the time, as if we're going to believe the referee that didn't want to decide the game. He decided that game. He decided the series. So, and
perhaps the Stanley Cup in itself, if San Jose goes that far, it totally has ruined the playoffs for me for the rest of the playoffs. It's shot to me because it's not just. The wrong team is moved on because of the refs.
It's something like the NFL with the Rams and the Saints. The wrong team won, and they got punished in the Super Bowl.
It's sad, but once again, the point is that the refs are the ones that caused this, and they're the ones saying they didn't want to have anything to do with it. Anyways, the topic for today, the major topic, is about the Ilitches and the Little Caesars Arena and what they've done with District Detroit. To give a little overview of it, the Ilitches bought a whole bunch of property long before they got or made the Little Caesars Arena, and they, using their lobbyists in both Lansing and Detroit City Council, they got them to change the laws, the city council, to switch over some money from was once earmarked for schools, and they switched it to sports arenas and sporting events. To the tune of $324 million of taxpayers' money, and they promised office space, retail, as well as housing, and they've delivered very little of that.
Well, I've been doing my hardest this whole entire week to look for a reason to maybe back the Ilitches up here, because I just can't see a company that would go in and make such a promise and just flat out renege. So the only research that I've done that I can find out is for these neighborhoods and the retail. Now, the neighborhood I'm talking apartments, condos, not the individual housing neighborhoods. The retail space, I think they made a grave error in judging their demand for such locations or such business, be it the condos, the apartments, and the office space. Because before anything can be built or any ground be broken, the insurance companies and banks have worked it out to where 50% of those buildings must be sold. So you got to have the condo, the occupancy. If there's 100 rooms, they want 50 rooms already paid for before they'll even break ground. And that's the insurance company and the banks. Well, most of these projects, they've come up way short. And an article that I got here from the Nolan Finley show, basically he brings up that one of the obstacles reportedly tripping up the project is the Ilitches had a partnership with a company, between Olympia Development, which the Ilitches owns, and a Baltimore-based Cordish Cause. They are one of the most successful big project outfits in the country as far as development. Their relationship has broken off or seriously frayed. Now, Olympia doesn't have the infrastructure to handle a massive development. So before all this started, they got into a deal with this company to assist them in the development. Well, the relationship is broken off, frayed. It could be because they didn't fill it up, and now it's just gone. The problem I have is the Ilitches are not explaining that. They're not telling that. They're coming out and just warping with a spin of a release statement how they've developed the city and they've given $50 million and they've done this and that, to where the area we're speaking about from the deal that they agreed to, they've gone dark and they're not explaining anything for it. And it's kind of opened up to where there are people like Representative Rashid Tlaib, and she's what they call an anti-development activist. And the Ilitches are almost like giving her this stuff as a silver platter to use against the development of Detroit. You can go into the details of what Detroit was supposed to be as far as a link between downtown and midtown, because it's just parking lots. And again, I tried hard to defend them, and this is the only thing I could see. But at the same time, why haven't they said that? Why am I the one having to look this up? And I'm guessing, because I can't figure out why they would literally $40 million, $20 million to the taxpayers.
$324 million of the taxpayers, but the whole project was $863 million project. It included a 20,000 seat state of the art arena anchoring 12 acres of mixed use buildings and a parking garage. And it was supposed to be the centerpiece of the District Detroit, the family's wider $2 billion 50 city block development plan.
See, now part of the problem is, yes, it's not being developed, and there are a lot of people who live in those neighborhoods. It's just flat land. They're just buying it up, and it's parking lots, and they're making money off the parking lots. But another problem is, and I don't know who negotiated the deal, but Detroit's getting screwed as far as the concessions, the parking, the merchandise. I mean, you go to most of the big cities, I don't want to say all, but most of them, and portions go to the city. Now, the Villages don't own LCA. They lease it from the Detroit Authority. So Detroit owns that building. So why they wouldn't want part of the profits from the concession stands? And that's really not a part of the story. The story is not developing it, but they kind of went one up, and they're just really killing Detroit and not sharing any. I don't want to say share. They're not giving any of that, which they should get, because they own the building of concessions.
I think it is part of the story. The Ilitches negotiated during a time when Detroit was bleak, when they were in the middle of one of the worst bankruptcies and the worst in United States history. And so they came with a lot of leverage, and the city had none. And the city was desperate to get any kind of commerce into the downtown Detroit area. And in doing so, they agreed to something that ended up hurting them. The old Joe Louis, the Ilitches split 50-50 with their the tickets and the merchandise and parking with the city. In this particular deal, the city got none of that.
Right, but I don't think that has anything to do with the development of the property that they promised to develop. This is just saying, hey,
it's another example of them screwing over the city.
No, they either had a shrewd developer, or a negotiator, or the city of Detroit had a bad one. Because the city of Detroit should have said, no, we're getting whatever, 30%, not 50. Something would have been better than nothing. This is why I
said they were desperate. And they did it because of the desperation of the time. When this all went down, it was desperate times. The city was going dark.
It kind of makes it look even worse for the Ilitches, because it makes it look like I think they're taking advantage. And that makes it to where they could have now, they don't have to, but they could have said, hey, 20% to the city to help you out. And which now I can see where you're tying it into, because it makes them look worse because they're not developing this. From what I get, it's supposed to develop a midtown that connects them to the downtown, which I thought was residential neighborhoods, but I was wrong. It's more condos, apartments, and office space. But again, they didn't get the people to come down. Now, Bedrock Corporation or Bedrock Company, which Jan Gilbert owns, this makes it even look worse. They're developing, they're building the buildings, and they're doing what they said. The Ilitches aren't. So I'm having a hard time finding out why.
Well, this is why I think those concessions are important, because I think the city probably gave up those concessions thinking they were going to get something back after it was developed.
The vibrant city kind of thing?
Yes, they were going to get something in the end. And it turns out the Ilitches totally flubbed on their part of the deal. My biggest part of the problem is I'm a capitalist, but this is the height of crony capitalism. They went to the government to get their money. If it was their own money, they could do what they want, build all the parking lots they want, and use that money if they want. But the fact that they went and got taxpayers, and worse than that, most of the taxpayers are not going to benefit from the Red Wings. Most of those who watch the Red Wings, go to see the Red Wings, are from the suburbs. So the taxpayers of the city of Detroit, those taxpayers are not getting, they're getting screwed.
Does Duggan or the city council have anything to do with this? Because they voted those people in. And if they vote them in, they have to take what those guys set up, whatever deals it may be, as bad as they may be. And if that's the case here.
That doesn't wipe out the fact they're being screwed. Even if that's the case, they're being screwed. And the problem, once again, I have is that you say something, if you have integrity, you follow through with it. They knew it was a possibility. These are smart people we're talking about. They don't build a pizza company into $1 billion industry, worldwide industry, not knowing what could happen in the future. They are smart people. They knew that it was going to be hard to fill these residential districts, yet they still promised they would. Worse than that, there's no work going on. Right now, it's all parking lots. There's no work being done on any residential. There's a few office spaces that are going up. They were talking about what I read, that the Mike Ilitch School of Business was planned to open at the end of last year. And I haven't heard of them opening yet, but that was part of the plan. But once again, no residential. They have totally just forgotten about the residential.
I think in Crane's magazine, the Ilitch, the son, I forget his name, who's running the company now, he brought up about the Ilitch School of Business in Wayne State as already being open and as being one of the gems of what they've done. So is it open?
I didn't hear anything. If it is open, there's one promise, but that's, once again, is not the residential part of it.
Well, the residential part, again, from what I've researched, they can't get the 50% or the minimum of buyers. Without that, they're not going to build.
Then they shouldn't have promised it. They should never have promised that. If they knew that was a possibility, they had to have. They're smart people.
I'm going to agree. They bit off more than they could chew.
They should never have promised that. And the fact that they promised it and are not following through on it, blame is on the Ilitches. They took taxpayer money on that contingent.
What I'm trying to bring up is that's why they're not going to build these office buildings until they get the 50% office buildings, the condominiums and apartments. They need 50% residential people to already pay the lease for whatever 6 months to a year, and they're not even close to that. So if they're not close to getting that now, and they have a problem with a major developer, and this company is the big dogs of developing areas, and they're not doing it now, nothing's going to happen. It's not getting built because there's no people. Now, I know I heard in the beginning when this all started, when they first started the proposals to go through, when they're talking about moving into LCA, that it was going to be a grand joint adventure. It was going to be a new city. The people would come. They're not coming.
Well, they also promised jobs too. Those jobs didn't materialize. I got from Detroit.curb.com. The Ilitch family's Olympia development bought large parcels of land in the area known as Cass Corridor for years, promising to build an entertainment and residential district around the new hockey arena. Currently, instead of a dense urban area, it looks more like a suburban stadium surrounded by parking lots. New construction continues to go up in the area, immediately surrounding the area, but no residential has opened, and areas outside the arena continue to be leveled for parking. Cranes has reported that a residential high-rise could be planned overlooking Comerica. In recent months, Olympia has backed away from the residential plans, instead moving to build more office space. They're reneging on the residential part, and that was a major part of what because that's tax revenue that Detroit would get. And that's why I think Detroit said, or the city said, we'll give you your concessions. You can have your parking money, but and in exchange, we'll get the tax revenue. But they're getting the Ilitches are getting the parking money, but the city's not getting the tax revenue.
They too, like the Ilitches, made a critical error.
They were desperate because of the times.
Made a critical error.
That doesn't excuse the Ilitch Holdings for doing what they did. That may be the case, and you could be right, but that's still not an excuse. This is pure crony capitalism.
No, I agree. And I found a little article that basically says, speaking in favor of the arena project and its justification, new jobs and economic development. During this segment entitled Motown Blues was Livonia Republican Representative John Waltz. He himself championed the 2012 legislation that allowed the eventual public funding for new arena construction. That right tells you what you said earlier, that they literally took the money from other areas and put it for arena construction. All right.
So money originally was earmarked for schools. Now, Detroit schools are bad enough as it is. I'm not for public schools. I'm against public schools. But still, to take the money that was allocated for schools and to put it to sports and then not come through with what their promises, there's a moral shortcomings there on the Ilitches.
Well, before coming to this podcast, I was watching the news and I heard the union representative for the Detroit teachers. And if I'm not mistaken, I heard June 30th of this year, the contract ends. And they want 10,000. The teachers in Detroit are paid $10,000 less on average than anyone else in the country as far as teachers go. So they're asking for that $10,000, and that money could have went to the Little Caesar Arena.
Well, I guess it's a separate issue, but Detroit schools are also worse than the rest of the country. So they should be paid less.
He brought that up. But I bring that only because linking it to, they took it from the education, and it's going to come back and bite them in the June 30th when they renegotiate, and there's no money to pay these teachers. Now, yeah, they're the worst, I get it, but the money was taken, what was in the schools, and now it's for Little Caesars Arena, and there's no benefit because they're not developing. And look, they got to come to the conclusion, or Detroit does, it's not going to be built. These people are not coming. No one's buying the business office space. No one's buying the apartments. And if no one buys the apartments, they're not going to build it. They have to achieve this minimal 50% occupancy. And until they do, and right now, I think one building just started like 2 weeks ago, and that was breaking ground because they achieved. And I don't know the number. I heard from 5 to 9 office or apartments, condominiums. So that could be 5, but only one, because that's how long it's taken to get that one building the occupancy. No, they made a critical error in judgment. I don't even think they cared. What you were saying, they saw a situation where they had a weak opponent. They took advantage of that opponent, which being Detroit, the city of Detroit. And to make it worse, I think they brought the Pistons from Auburn into Detroit to make it more affordable, because now they're paying at least too. It's not just the Red Wings.
Well, I see more of the city of Detroit using the Pistons than the Red Wings. So at least that the Detroiters, some of them, there are obviously suburbanites that follow the Pistons, but at least some of those Detroiters are going to get something out of that tax. Where the Red Wings, very, very little Detroiters. City residents of Detroiters follow the Red Wings. So they're getting nothing out of that side of it. But to give the Ilitches their fair share, I want to read their holding statement that they brought out when HBO.
But this disappoints me, though. So go ahead.
The Ilitch holding statement is, our organization has 6 decades of dedication, commitment, and positive impact throughout the broader Detroit community. We are exceptionally proud of our accomplishments, including the creation of thousands of jobs, the restoration of various historic buildings, and the development of downtown sports, and an entertainment district that has surged since the opening of Little Caesars Arena. It is unfortunate when a media outlet emphasizes the voices of a critical few and not the voices of the many who would present the positive story that is taking place across our city. The result was a self-interested, sensationalized, and inaccurate report designed to attract viewers instead of a balanced report on the rebirth of Detroit and our contributions to the city's turnaround. Public funds for the arena came from specific tax dollars allocated to a fund to fund a catalyst development project that would drive economic growth in the city of Detroit. Our commitment to the city was to develop a $450 million arena and within 5 years deliver $200 million in additional development directly or by others. The reality is that we exceeded our commitment and also know that this catalyzed numerous other development projects in and around the arena, including a variety of residential. We invested over $863 million in a state-of-the-art, award-winning arena and are on track to have over $200 million in private development completed this year, roughly 5 years ahead of schedule. We remain undeterred in our commitment to the city and its bright future. We will continue to invest in successful projects that will drive job creation, economic growth, and enhance, for years to come, the quality of life for Detroiters. Now, my problem with that statement is doesn't talk about District Detroit at all.
Not one word.
It talks about what they did in the past, as if that sets aside or is okay. Since they in the past, what I think they mean is the Fox.
Who wrote that statement? Do you know? To say
It's from the Illich holding statement. It's from the Illiches. It's from them.
what they don't understand, I think they probably made a huge error because they said there they gave what $800 million to the city of Detroit.
No, the 863 million was for the state of the art award winning, according to this statement.
That's of their money.
That's the total cost for the
Right.
arena, not their money. Because 324 million of
'Cause
that came from the city of Detroit.
What you were also pointing out with the Pistons, they also, I don't know how they did it, if it's through the legislation, but they got more bonds to pay for the retrofitting of LCA because it was at first all the Red Wings. When the Pistons came in, they had to get rid of those red seats. So they didn't pay for it. They went and got more bonds, which was $34 million to change the seats. That wasn't their money.
Once again, coin capitalism.
So here we go, right back to it. And they left that completely out there when he's talking about what he did for the city. And it's not really, from what that statement, I don't hear, that's why I'm disappointed. I don't hear one thing about the project involving the build-up in between LCA and what Dan Gilbert's doing. That was the whole goal, and nothing's been done. Now, I wish they'd come out and bring up the point that, hey, we can't get the people down here to build them. I wish they'd say that.
Well, here's the problem. They had a chance to talk to Real Sports, HBO. They didn't. They refused to talk. And worse than that, Crane's Business tried talking to them. Now, if you're going to talk to anyone, that's a reputable business publication. Those are the ones to talk to, and then refuse to talk to them. That shows either cowardice or they're admitting their failure. Why wouldn't they talk? Why wouldn't they? At least to Crane's. Why wouldn't they?
Embarrassment. It hasn't gone like they should.
If they were right, though, according to the statement, there's nothing to be embarrassed about.
That's just it. That statement. And they know that's why they made the statement. That's why they made that.
This is PR is what this
correct.
was.
That's a spin. And they know they can't spin it on TV with Cranes or HBO because the person opposite, be it Crane or I forget who the HBO guy is, but they're going to be held accountable. This statement here, there's no one holding them accountable. They're writing their story, their narrative, or their why in this statement here. To where they couldn't do that if they were being interviewed. And that's why you'd be called coward. I'm going to say they'd be held accountable. They'd be embarrassed because these points would be brought up and they couldn't tell you. Now that brings me to where there's something more than just my theory, because I've looked it up and the only thing I could find is that it's just a theory that they can't get the people to come down in the office or the apartments.
That's still no excuse, but just, it was Real Sports David Scott who tried to interview them and he came empty. No one from the Illich company or the Illiches themselves would talk to him.
It's tough in this day to find people accountable, but I don't understand it. If that was the case, and maybe it's not, maybe I'm completely wrong on this, but why can't they come out and say, listen, we made a mistake. We thought people would come. We've only got one building filled at 50% occupancy. The rest, we haven't met that plateau, that goal yet. And I think people understand that.
So let me get this straight. So the excuse is they haven't come to fill the residential area. So we're not going to build that, but we'll still build nothing but parking lots and take all the revenue from the parking lots and parking garages. And that's fine. We can do that. See, they want the best of both worlds. They're taking both sides.
They're coming out they're looking bad on this deal because again, they're not explaining it. But if it is that they have to have a minimum occupancy and they don't have it, how are they going to build it?
They shouldn't have promised it.
No, I agree. I agree. But let's how are they going to build it now? Because that's where we're at. We want it built. We want the apartments and the office spaces built. Now, What I think it also, the insurance companies are involved in this because back in the 30s with the Empire State Building, that went 20 years before it returned a profit. And the insurance companies, and I worked for an insurance company, and these guys, they're cruel. They want all your payments, but even the life insurance. When it comes down to make the claim, you passed away, it was $100,000 payout. Well, they're going to go back and say, well, the birth date's wrong, so we deny your claim. And they win. The insurance company is saying, look, we want your money, but we don't want to give you money back. And they're doing the same thing here. We're not going to let the bank payroll or bank this until you get this occupancy, because if you don't, we're going to be on the hook to pay the bank their losses. And we're not even going to underwrite this until they meet that criteria. And I think no one's going to come.
From Detroit City point of view, why are your problems my problems?
Again, a good question. They never should have promised it. But at the end of the day, that's where we're at, and this is why. You're right. It's not your problem. I have a problem, and this should be the Illages. I can't fill these. And they got to discuss now how to get the people down here. We made a critical error in seeing, we thought we could fill it up, and we can't.
What makes them look really bad is they filled up with nothing but parking lots. They have no problem building the parking lots. That makes them look so atrociously bad. If you look downtown, or it's not even downtown, they call it Midtown, but around the Little Caesars Arena, it is blight. And the arena's been out for 2-3 years now. They could have at least done more than just build parking lots and parking garages. The Illages own so many buildings, empty, vacant buildings around there, and they're just sitting there doing nothing. Why did they buy them if they weren't going to do something with them?
I can't recall the iconic bar or restaurant that the Illages, Olympia Development just purchased for $2.2 million on the Cass Corridor. The common guess is what you're just saying, another parking lot. They want to just take it down. But again, the owner sold it to them, and it's vacant now. There's nothing there. It goes along with your about the blight. I don't know what they're going to do with it. But again, if it is parking lots, they're just making themselves look worse. So the Illages, I don't know how they're going to get themselves out of this.
Well, they could get by fulfilling their promises. That's the only way.
It's not going to happen.
The reason why they want those parking garages, because that's money to the Illages.
Correct, yeah.
Straight money, doesn't go
Fans
to Detroit.
Come down their park, yeah.
And it goes straight to them. And there is the problem. They can take that money, no problem. They can fulfill that part of the obligation. But when it comes to building the office spaces and residential and making it just a better area, we'll get to that, is what we hear.
I guess another point of the story is the Illages are giving capitalists a really bad rep or bad name, because this is not how capitalism works. And yet they will call it capitalism, and that's not the case.
Well, it's not capitalism. It's crony capitalism.
And to make everyone, just to explain a little bit of another area. Go ahead.
Well, a capitalist does not work with the government, a true capitalist. A capitalist is an individualist who does it on their own. You don't go to the taxpayers, because you go to the taxpayers, that's a form of socialism. Well, that's not capitalism.
I'll give you another example where it's accepted every day, and I don't think the people understand it or realize what they're doing, that they're paying money out of their paychecks every single week or 2 weeks. It's called the Medicare tax. And this Medicare tax pays for nursing homes. It is crony capitalism to the core. These owners of these nursing homes, the physical therapy, the rate they charge Medicare, and just for an example, a shared room is $350 to $400 a day. Now, the only reason they're getting this money is because Medicare is paying for it. That's the government. And we, out of our checks, it's the Medicare tax, are giving the government this money to pay these capitalists. It's not capitalism.
So don't call them that then. Stop calling them capitalists. They're not capitalists.
They're giving the industry to where other people like the Illages are seeing this and they think it's capitalism. It's crony capitalism. You're correct. They're giving them a bad name, in which now the socialists out there are seizing it because see how bad they are, the greed and so forth. They're making us or capitalism look bad.
Our first episode was about pragmatism.
And that's what this is.
That's what this is. The end justifies the means. And the end is we want that arena. That's all that matters to us. So we'll do any shady deal to get that arena.
And I think you were clear in that episode that the Wings, the Illages, have a motto of whatever it takes.
Just like they did when they bought the Stanley Cup in 2002. Whatever it takes.
This is another extension of whatever it took to get that stadium up to where we can get our revenue, our parking lots, and at the same time, 100% of the concessions, parking, merchandise, ticket sales. That's a lot of money that they get to keep for themselves. So I think you're right there. They just said, hey, whatever it takes to make this happen, and we'll suffer the consequences. And that is refusing to talk to Crain's and HBO, because it's going to come to light. And I don't think this is going to go away anytime soon.
It shouldn't. But to put a little bow on this to end it, this is why pragmatism is so prevalent in our society. No one knows what it is. And when they act, because they did it, I can do it. And that justifies me doing it. Just someone else does it. There's no excuse for that. No excuse.
I agree. And before we go, anyone that's got feedback, please give us your feedback. Tell us, do you agree with the Ilitches? Do you disagree? Where is your standing? Give us a topic that you'd like to see us discuss within sports ethics, and we'll be happy to bring that to light.
You can tell us that or give that feedback at our website at granddesignspodcast.com. Also, our email is granddesignspodcast@yahoo. Once again, you can subscribe at iTunes. You can subscribe and listen on YouTube as well as Facebook, and follow us. Instagram is at Grand Designs Podcast, and follow us on Twitter is at Grand Designs Pod. This is the Grand Designs Podcast. Who are you listening to?
You guys all set?
Well, I just texted. So you ignore that.